Howdy, anyone. This is IDM Table Talk, the show where I broadcast my ignorant opinions on TTRPGs into the void of the internet. I am your host, an evil man. Today, we're going to begin a very long series of videos diving into the rule set for DC20. Now, DC20 is a new TTRPG that's being developed by the Dungeon Coach. Links in the description. And it is the first game that I have backed on Kickstarter. And I backed it because it seemed like the next step. A lot of people described it as actual Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition instead of the 5.5 that we ended up getting. But before we dig really deeply into the rules, what I'd like to do is to just take a little bit of a walk and go over just why I think DC20 is cool, and see if I can get you excited about learning about the system. And to start with, we're going to begin with advantage. Now, advantage, for those of you who didn't already know, is when you roll 2 dice and you take the highest result. Now, this is a very powerful effect. You can see it doubles your chance of getting a nat 20. And your odds of rolling a 15 or better jump from 30% to 50%. This is why, by the way, you'll often hear that a good rule of thumb for getting advantage is that you get a +5 to your roll. That's because your 50% jumps from 11 to 15, which is actually more of a +4, but you know. But what if we were to stack this? So if rolling 2 dice is good, rolling 4 dice must be even, right? So by the time you're rolling 4 dice, your chance of rolling a 15 or better has jumped up to 3 out of every 4 times you do it. Your chances of rolling a 20, it's 1 out of every 5. And so this is a really powerful effect. You can see here, your chance of rolling a 1 at 2 decimal places, it's not even countable. You just ignore it. That's how powerful rolling 4 dice and taking the maximum is for getting high numbers. It's just a really, really good for you. And so that's just something I wanted to get as a background. And now let's talk about how different systems use advantage. And we're going to start with what everybody knows, Dungeons & Dragons. Now, they rely on advantage and disadvantage, which is just the opposite of advantage. Roll 2 dice, take the lowest. They rely on it instead of doing a lot of +1s, 2s, 3s. They just use you gain advantage or you gain disadvantage. Now, Dungeons & Dragons likes to keep their math pretty flat. A level 1 character still has a pretty decent shot of hitting a level 11 character just because they don't let the math go crazy. And in order to do that, they make sure that they don't do stacking advantage. You can't roll 3 dice and take the highest. If you have multiple sources of advantage, that's just 1 advantage. Same with disadvantage. And if you have any of both advantage and disadvantage, it cancels out and you just roll more. Again, this is in service to Dungeons & Dragons keeping the math flat. They call it bounded accuracy. And it has its benefits, you know, it's simple. But let's talk about DC20. DC20 decided to embrace the madness of rolling those dice multiple times. And so they allow for stacking advantage and stacking disadvantage. Now, in DC20, each stack of advantage will cancel out 1 stack of disadvantage. So if you have 2 sources giving you advantage, which would mean you would roll 3 dice and take the highest. and you have one effect giving you disadvantage, then that would be treated as having one stack of advantage, which would mean roll 2 dice and take the highest. And DC20 also prefers using this system to just giving flat bonuses. It likes using advantage and disadvantage instead of giving you, random +1s, +2s. So we've talked a bit about advantage. Now let's move on to something a little different. Let's talk about actions. What you can do in combat. So Dungeons and Dragons, each turn lets you do one action, one bonus action, and a move. There's also a reaction, which can happen off your turn. And the reaction is there primarily to try to keep people invested in the game when it's not their turn. So you might be able to do an attack of opportunity, which means that if somebody moves past you, you can attack them even if it's not your turn. That's the most common. And all of these are restored, your action, bonus action, reaction of movement, at the beginning of your turn. In DC20, it drops having different types of action. So instead of having an action, bonus action, reaction, you get 4 action points, and you have no dedicated reaction. And an interesting difference between DC20 and D&D is that your action points are restored at the end of your turn rather than at the beginning of your turn. The primary point of that is that using reactions uses the same action points that you get on your turn. And the system encourages you to use all of your points before your turn ends because you're going to get them back. And there is a world in which you end your turn, you get 4 action points, and maybe 4 times off of your turn, you get the opportunity to use a reaction, and so you spend all of your points, and then your turn comes along and you've already done all the cool stuff, so you just get your points back and you wait for the next turn. And I find this from a tactical perspective just way more interesting than Dungeons and Dragons action type system. So then, digging a little deeper into how these actions get used. The Dungeons and Dragons separating their actions into types is there to limit flexibility. A single action is a very valuable commodity in Dungeons and Dragons, and they have a design philosophy around one thing at a time. And in fact, there's quite a bit of language in the rules in various places to protect that one thing at a time. So like Quicken Spell, it says, yes, you can use 2 sorcery points and you can cast a spell, which usually uses an action. You can cast it to a bonus action. But if you've done that, you cannot cast another spell on your turn because one thing at a time. Same thing with Action Surge. In the most recent updates to Dungeons & Dragons, they actually changed this because Action Surge was really supposed to be limited to fighters, to use it to do lots and lots of regular physical attacks. And lots of magic users were taking a 2-level dip into fighter to get Action Surge because they could cast 2 spells with Action Surge. Even if they couldn't use Quicken Spell to do it, they could do it with Action Surge. But they changed it so that you can no longer take the magic action with Action Surge. So they wanted to protect that one thing at a time. The other problem with this whole system is that bonus actions can be difficult to use, especially when you're at low level. You may not have a lot of options for your bonus action, so at the end of your turn, you just can't think of something to use for it, so you don't use it. And when you get higher level, if you're not careful, you may actually end up with too many things competing for your bonus action. And so your movement often also goes wasted because you're a fighter, you're right up next to the guy you want to attack, so you just stay still. Why would you go anywhere? It's just no point to it. So how does DC20 use its action points? Well, you can see here, I was kind of running out of room to kind of pick some examples. There's loads of ways to spend your action points. One of the things that DC20 does in order to try and prevent you from just doing the same thing over and over again is they have the multiple check penalty. What that means is if you're doing the same thing over and over again, each time you do it, you're going to get stacking disadvantage. Now, one of the things you can do to counteract that is this ability to spend action points to gain advantage. Now, this is super powerful because you note here that it says when a creature makes a check or a save, it can spend an action point to gain advantage. Just at any time. You can use this on a save, so if you get attacked by a spell, you can really make sure you save against it. If you are attacking somebody and you really want to make sure you hit, you can spend lots of action points to make sure you hit, but you can also do things like power attack. Or on your spells, you can add damage by spending an extra action point. Just, there's all sorts of different things, even at level 1, where you can spend action points. You are not going to end your turn saying, oh man, I have an action point and I just don't know what to do with it. It's going to be way more instances where it's going to be off your turn and you're going to be biting your nails wondering, should I protect my ally or should I save it up to do, double power attack on my turn? So lots of really interesting choices here to make. And that's pretty cool, right? But we're not done. Let's talk about where I wanted to go with this. And we're going to start that off with Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. So in Dungeons & Dragons, Great Weapon Master is considered a must-have for many, many builds. Same with Sharpshooter. If you want to do long-range combat, you're going to want Sharpshooter. You're going to want Great Weapon Master. Now, these other abilities here, critical hit, you get to make an additional melee attack, or your ranged weapon ignores 1/2 and 3/4 cover. Those are good. But the real ability that everybody wants off of these is this -5 penalty to attack, +10 to damage. That trading accuracy for damage is just so valuable. And note here, it's a -5 penalty. Remember that +5 that you get when you get advantage? So a really obvious way to use this is that if you've got advantage on an attack, you add this penalty to get the damage because it sort of equals out. It means you just get to attack at regular penalty and you get to do a +10 to your damage. And this is so useful and such an interesting tactical choice that anytime you go and watch, lists of greatest feats in Dungeons & Dragons, these two usually end up somewhere near the top. But what about DC20? And this is where I really wanted to end this. Okay? In DC20, every attack is like having Great Weapon Master. Because on every attack, you can choose to spend additional action points and gain advantage. In the insane extreme, you could be triple stacking advantage and you are really gonna hit, right? And this works even for spellcasters. Because spellcasters, when they're making their spell attacks, they make a check. And so they can put advantage on it. And this is all really great. But it's a trade-off. Because instead of putting 3 points into making your attack super accurate, you could put 3 points into power attack and deal an additional 3 damage if you hit. And so in DC20, everybody has Great Weapon Master, everybody has Sharpshooter, and they have it all the time, from level 1. You don't have to take extra feats, this is just built into the system. And this This is just one subsystem in DC20. That stacking with advantage has other impacts on the system that interact together to just, again, make DC20's combat really cool, really interesting and tactical, and I think a way that Dungeons and Dragons just does it. And it does it in a way that's not so math heavy with lots of +1s and +2s that you have to add here and there. You're just adding dice and taking dice away. And so with that, I hope that I've gotten you interested in DC20. That this is maybe something that you want to follow, that this is something you want to, this game is something you may want to go and support and buy the book. And I really think the system's cool, and it's why I want to talk about it. And I'm broadcasting it into the void of the internet because my wife, saint though she is, doesn't want to hear me ramble on about this stuff for, an hour at a time. I hope that you have found this interesting. I hope that you'll follow along as we continue these table talks. And I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.